Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. It's on the DM32 Smart Gauge overview and a couple new product announcements from Retrotec. I will show a live demonstration on how the gauge works and go through those and in the software. But what I want to do is just kind of give you an overview with some slides so you kind of get an idea of what that is. This is the main home screen for the DM32 Smart Gauge. I'm trying to outline in yellow what are some things to be aware of on the gauge. Each screen actually changes, kind of like maybe your smartphone does, depending on what you're doing. So channel A is on the top here, and channel B is below. If I tap the little area, it's not highlighted in yellow, but I try to show you the areas that are active. That if I tap this, it becomes the hold feature. Channel B is where your results show up, and you have a lot of options for your results. For those of you that are used to the DM2, you know that you can actually get your results as air changes per hour, or CFM per 100 square feet, or per square foot, or there's a nice list of options. EQLA, equivalent leakage area. You can also actually literally just tap on the image of the fan that you're going to be using and change it to a different device, or just change the range that you're going to use. So again, I'll show these kind of live, and obviously the areas that are below, set pressure, set speed, and settings, are also areas where you can actually touch and change those kind of features. This is what the active screen looks like when you're actually performing a test. So I still have at the top the speed and my average, time average. I can turn on or off the actual at feature. That's the at 50 or at whatever test pressure I'm at. So I could be testing at 35 or 75 or 63. I can set it to anything. And notice that the at feature is on, and whatever number is here is also equivalent to what I'm seeking. At the bottom it tells me I'm seeking 25 pascals, and that's also what it will calculate the at feature to. So here I have the results set up for CFM per 100 square feet. The at feature is on, and it shows it at 25. And I'm using the DU200 Retrotec duct tester, and it's on the mid-range. So it gives you all the information you need. I can stop the test right now, or I can also jog up or jog down with the green arrows. I'll kind of go through on the slides real quick, and I'll do it again live. But here's how you actually change your device in the range. It's about as simple as you can imagine. You literally just will touch the, whoops, went too far. So you touch the icon, and it will bring up a screen and show you your options. And first it changes the range, and then you can change the actual device if you want to use a different device. So to change the results, which are, show up in channel B here, right now I have 1,563,000 CFM, and I can change that to other settings by just literally tapping on the channel B area. It'll bring up the screen, which are all of my results to be displayed in that area and calculated. So I can do pressure, if I'm going to do zonal pressure or something like that, or check the gauge, I can use pascals. CFM is what most people, we all live by, but if you'd like to get the answers calculated live while you do your test, there's CFM per 100, and I can just toggle here again, and it gives me CFM per 1,000 square foot or per square foot. It also gives me metric meter per, I don't remember all the metric ones that are there. So air changes per hour is the ones that always appeal to me, because sometimes I can do the CFM in my head, but the air changes per hour, that's actually one that I always love to see whether or not they're passing or failing right there. There's EQLA, and there's also a whole other screen of tapping at the bottom. I can then actually see what's the next screen. It gives me a whole list of EQLA and EFLA, and there's also, each one of those has options themselves when you tap on each one of those individually. You tap again on the circle with the dots. It takes you through each screen. I select which one I want to do, so we'll do air change per hour, I believe, and we'll go back. And now I just turned my CFM reading into air changes per hour. So I can see that live as the gauge runs. I'll do a basic overview, and I'll also give you a live demonstration on how that's the virtual gauge software works. This is something you can download free from the Retrotec website that I had up earlier. This actually will run as a standalone, by itself, practice gauge, which is phenomenal for training, or if you just want to learn how the gauge works without actually having it attached to something. It'll also convert measurements for you. And so if you actually want to know what is so many, if I set it for 25 pascals, what would be my pressure in the fan, and how do I convert that to maybe air changes per hour, or to CFM, or to a variety of stuff. It actually can convert things you'd want to play with or practice at home. It does not need to have a gauge or a fan attached to it. It's designed to actually give you simulated results all by itself in your PC. And again, you can download this and practice by yourself. When it comes up, over here it's asking you to find a gauge, and down here at the bottom is where it says Start or Stop Gauge Simulator, and that's what I have running right here. The other function that it does is it actually will connect to a gauge directly. So now on my PC I can actually control or just see what my gauge is doing. When Retrotec came out with this, I thought it was one of the greatest things they had released, because I describe it as I do a blower door, I set up my fan, I have the gauge, everything is still by the front door as it almost always has been. Now I can take my laptop to the kitchen, I can open it up, and I can actually control the fan with a Wi-Fi setup. Either one I have as a router with me, or I can just use the direct connect that the gauge has automatically. So I don't need to have anything else. The gauge provides the Wi-Fi, or I can use my own Wi-Fi setup. You can use your phone as a Wi-Fi source also. So the versatility is phenomenal that I can now actually do a variety of stuff with my PC, not standing next to the fan. And depending on what kind of PC you have, a lot of those are now smaller, lightweight, like the Surface, and it works also just like a tablet. So I explained quickly about the simulated mode that you can do. You can also assign assignments if you're a trainer. And the other thing you can do, which kind of is more, I guess it is a training slide that got left in here, but you can also, if you have a 2 gauges and you're going to do leakage to outside, for example, I know that test is no longer a code test, but I know ResNet and other third parties still required or like it as a way to actually test your ductwork. Then I can actually have 2 gauges running. So if you look at the image on the right, instead of having 4 gauges, maybe I only have 2 gauges, and they can be running together on my PC, and I can now control my blower door and my duct tester at one time on my PC. It's in my kitchen, so it's a lot easier to not have to run back and forth. Am I still at 50, or all these hoses and tubing and wires to try and figure out a way to see both gauges together. It's now just as easy to just do one location on your PC, and now I can now control multiple fans and gauges from one location. And the other thing that occurs when you have a PC is you can share that information. I have another slide that does that. So I can share my information through the internet with another person that also has an internet connection. And now the reality is your internet connection can be anywhere. All of our laptops and devices are such mobile now that it's not limited to an office. So before I had the PC application that's called Virtual Gauge, and what I'll demonstrate now, I'm trying to bring up, is the DM32 Wi-Fi app, which is called Gauge Remote. It's on the Google Play and Apple Store. There is no space, so if those of you that may be searching for it, it's again a Gauge Remote. There's no space, and sometimes each one of them has their own funky way of finding it. So if you're going to go to the Apple Store, the iOS, make sure you're on the iPhone Store. Now they have an iPhone, and they also have a tablet store. So this app is actually an iPhone app, even though it will work fine on your tablet. That's where you'll find it is on the iPhone store. You can also go to retrotec.com /app, APP, and find the direct links. And on Google Play, sometimes it shows up pretty quickly. Sometimes I'll search Retrotec when I have a new device, but in general, you should be able to find it without too much trouble. And I'll demonstrate today with an iPad about how that works and what that does. But basically, it's allowing you to be completely mobile with something you carry on your hip or your tablet, and I can now roam around the house anywhere and control the gauge remotely. Here's some of the ways we try to come up with some illustrations about how this will benefit us in the field and what we do. So one is I described in yellow down here. I can sit and control my gauge from the kitchen. I also can share the results with my clients. I can sit in a much more comfortable, simpler place and get the results that I'm used to dealing with standing at the fan. I do understand that sometimes your blower door test is actually fairly quick and simple. Sometimes the results happen quicker than it takes you to get it out of your truck and car and set it up. But sometimes you're trying to diagnose something or go around the house and see what's going on. So it's nice that I can actually see my results remotely, whether it's the PC app or the remote app. Like I said earlier, once I have something on a PC, and I predict that, if not this year, for sure next year, Google and other places are deciding to let you share your screen on your tablet and your phone. So just as I can share my screen on my computer now with a variety of software from Google Hangout or Skype or even GoToMeeting, I think soon that'll be a mobile device feature also. So I can share my screen with somebody else through the internet, and they could be on the beach, at their office, and they can actually see my live results right there where I'm at the house while the gauge is running. This also is something that we're trying to get through is actually an approved process to confirm compliance. So it is something that's not that complicated to do, and I'm trying to create a video. There is one that Corbett Lunsford and I did like at the spur of the moment that actually shows how this works, and it's a pretty easy feature. You can also let somebody else control your own PC. If you've actually called technical support, they do that, and it's easy to do that with somebody else. So if you're having problems, your proctor or trainer can also actually take control of your screen, which means they can control your gauge while you're there. Somebody else does it. Does the Wi-Fi integrate directly to Fantastic? It does, as long as your the Wi-Fi is connected with your the PC that you're using for the software. The one thing I can tell you from multiple trials and errors, the #1 error is when you find out that your PC is not actually connected on the same network as your device. So especially for tablets, they have a great ability to want to keep helping you by finding a better Wi-Fi source. So if you're trying to use a specific Wi-Fi source and there's one that's stronger or better or has a slight glitch, it'll go find another source. We're trying to overcome that, but in general, you got to make sure that your device is on the same Wi-Fi network as the gauge. So other ways you can also use it to be, here's the CAS test that several people asked about. So I can use the gauge remote, which is the application that you use on your tablet or your smartphone, right? And it gives you the exact identical display of the gauge. In fact, that's one of the awesome features about the virtual gauge on your PC or the one for your mobile devices. It's an identical screen. It actually shows you exactly what you see on your gauge. So there's no learning curve or trying to figure out what might be slightly different. It's always the same image. So I can have my gauge down in the combustion appliance zone, right? And it does have some, it has rare earth magnets on the back of it, which allows it to easily stick to the your hot water tank or to the furnace or to a metal door or a metal door frame. That's a great feature to know that you can put your gauge in a specific spot and not just have to prop it up someplace or lay it on the ground. It has its own ability to create its own Wi-Fi. It's a Wi-Fi create, and that signal usually will go up a couple of floors. 3 floors is tough for any Wi-Fi device that runs off of a battery. So whether it's Armin, Retrotec, or anybody else, there is a limitation when you use the gauge itself or any attachments to a gauge and try and do Wi-Fi and use that as a source. If you bring your own simple router, your limitations are very small. You actually can go almost anywhere in the house or outside and read the gauge. So here I've left my gauge. I can go around, open and close doors, or adjust fans, or try and find out what may be the concern for the combustion appliance area. Another one for those who actually do on-the-spot air sealing or duct sealing. They're really in the house. They're trying to actually do something, something's quick and simple on the fly sealing. You can actually be up in the attic and turn on and turn off the actual duct tester while I'm actually trying to find or seal the ducts in the attic. Or it could also be going around to seal the envelope. I can turn on or turn off the duct tester as I go, which is a great feature to not have to keep running something the entire time. And you also start to seal things while you do it. For those of you that want to see some QA options, if you go to the Retrotec website, there's you can download the virtual gauge, which I mentioned, and the other one that's also free software is called a data logger. This data logger allows you to literally record the data that runs through the gauge, and it creates a simple Excel spreadsheet. But you can set it up to be a very powerful and a great document to kind of just remember what you've done that day or what your results were. It's a great training application. And you can set the interval up like I have in the middle here for 1 second, which means that every second it'll actually capture readings that come through the gauge. And it captures pressures on channel A, and it captures the pressures on channel B, and it also keeps track of whatever the results are that we set for the gauge. So if I ask the gauge to also do air changes per hour, it also gives that to me as a result in the solution. I'll show you that in a second. It can also do more than one gauge at one time. So the one I show you here is I actually had 2 gauges going. For those of you that still have the DM2, you can download this software and use it on your PC. What it allows me to do is, if I use the DM2, I have to use a USB cable directly. If I use a DM32, I have the option of using the USB, or I can also just set it up for Wi-Fi. So I hit start logging, and it starts logging whatever interval. I could make this every minute, so it just grabs larger chunks of data for me. And then when I'm done, I'll hit stop, and it creates automatically an Excel spreadsheet. I know it's hard to read, so I'm going to just kind of zoom in so you can see what options you have here. So the results I have on the screen are showing you on the very left, column A is what was the gauge. So I had a DM32 and a DM2 running at the same time when I did this test. Getting the serial number, it tells me what device I was actually using with the gauge. So the DM32 was using a blower door for a Minneapolis Model 3, and the DM2 was running the Retrotec 1000. It tells me what the settings were in the gauge, and it can give me the speed from the DM32. But here's the data we're after. I have pressure A and pressure B, and I have the flow results that come out of that, which means whatever I have the gauge set up for. So these kind of criteria helps a lot to determine what range was I set on and what the results were for that time. One of the things that can help you in terms of keeping track of the data is that I have mine saved automatically to a Dropbox folder. So it means instantly it's saved to some place that I can share it easily, or other people can have access as soon as it's done. And one of the things that's really great about the Dropbox or Google Drive or SugarSync and Box is that it can tell if the document has been altered because it creates versions for you. So it's easy to determine that somebody wasn't trying to go back and alter readings or do something. So I think this is one of the beginnings of how we can do great QA, share those results quickly, and know that they're actually been accurate and were not altered. The last thing I have for you is the other part of the software that's downloadable from the Retrotec, and that is the DM32 is a phenomenal gauge. I mean, really, when I first got to it, I was just blown away by all the features it has. Then they came out with a smaller one that has the yellow sides, and it looks like a really thick iPhone to kind of describe it and what it looks like. But Retrotec, when they developed it, it took a couple of years for them to actually develop the gauge itself, and they realized that by the time it came out, that there would be other stuff that needed to get changed, or features, or how the user face changed. So a lot of stuff needed to be upgraded. So that was built into the entire design, that you do not need to send your DM32 back for any kind of upgrade or firmware change, that you can actually upgrade the gauge with free software that you download, plug it in with a USB cable, and a couple of steps to set up the gauge, and it'll update your firmware automatically. So that's a great way that your smart gauge only gets smarter in time. It also has a 5-year I'll repeat that again, 5-year calibration cycle. So if that's something that has been a challenge or a hindrance, now the gauge is much more stable, and you actually can go much longer without calibration. It also controls Minneapolis fans. Now we can actually have Coke and Pepsi in the same room, and it gives a lot of options for people that want to upgrade or move into a different option with just a gauge. When I talk to people, I describe, you know what, your gauge is, and we saw your fan is a lot like your truck. You know, it'll run for a long time. But sometimes you may need a new transmission or something that helps control or run your vehicle. So to me, it's one way to actually take something you use all the time and upgrade what you have. So you're basically going to keep the same speed control adapter that you already have, or speed control. They have a special speed control adapter that will now connect to your speed control. And then the gauge kind of sits exactly where the old manometer sat. And they give you a new set of tubing and all the small connections that you need to make that work. So on the left is the speed control adapter. It's fairly small. Over on the right, I showed you the screen when you go through the options of changing devices, that I can actually pick the duct blaster or the Model 3, 110 or 220 or Model 4. It also is set up to automatically give you readings for the exhaust flow meter or true flow flow meter. So there's a lot of versatility between what kind of results I get and still using an older fan that I might have by just upgrading my gauge itself. All right, here's our new product announcements. In a second, I have a few more slides, and I'll go through some live demonstrations. So there is a brand new door frame that Retrotec has just released. And one of the things I want you to notice is you can see the corners. It's kind of, I'll show you how it comes in and out. But the new corners do a much better job of trying to catch that little edge in the corner. So for those people that are doing a passive house, or so many houses are getting so much tighter now that you want to try and reduce the amount of leakage that's happening in the door cloth and the frame itself. So they really have the weatherization, the weather stripping that goes all across the top. It does a much better job of trying to catch this corner so it fits tighter into the frame itself. So it's similar to something you may have used with camping, on how it comes together with a few fingers and pops in. And also you can use the button to just undo it, right? Or actually, when I do my live demo here, I'm going to show you actually how you can just kind of rack the frame and everything kind of pops apart. So taking your frame apart, it's just been reduced significantly. So if anybody has any suggestions about better ways to set up or take down your frame, Retrotec would love to hear, and I would love to hear your ways you do it or what your methodology is. Many of the changes that have always happened in the Retrotec equipment have come from users like yourself, so they really do take your feedback, whether it's today or anytime you want to send an email. And many of the upgrades have always been really pushed or foreseen by people in the real field. So don't hesitate to send us any of your ideas. Here's the new size of the door frame, which is phenomenal. Most people, you would have had to get an extension kit to try and use the frame in some of these larger doors, but now you actually can go 53 inches wide by 97 tall. I know when I first started testing, I was always frustrated. I carried a long 2x6, and I had a little piece that I put at the top for doors that were just a little too big. So now it actually comes with a much larger opening size automatically. Retrotec is now also offering a powered flow hood, and it's the FlowFinder. And I know that Colin's here. He's answering some questions. Colin, would you like to? I have a few slides here. Would you like to introduce and talk about the powered flow hood?
Yeah, it's a new device. It's one that's that the manufacturer has spent 5 or 6 years developing. It's actually made in Holland, and Retrotec provides some of the attachments and is involved in doing some of the engineering for the U.S. market and so on. But it's an incredible device. It's only 10 inches high, 10.5 inches high. It's so light you can see that somebody's holding with one hand there. It weighs 5.5 pounds. Will run 8 to 10 hours on a full charge with batteries. And in the same configuration, you can measure supply or exhaust. You don't have to change anything. And there are various hoods that you can attach to it. Here we show the 16-inch hood, which I think only makes it about, actually 16 inches high. It's 16 by 16 exactly, so it's kind of easy. It's called zero pressure balance up to 323 CFM, and it will go 500 CFM with a calculated balance. So it's an amazingly accurate piece of equipment. The problems that we have in measuring flows are pretty much around supply flows, which are very difficult to measure. Just a box of the hole net will measure exhaust flows very well. And also return flows where you've got a number of registers on the same return, and the moment you put a regular flow hood over there, all the flow goes through the other return. So it's one we're just starting to get out there, and if anybody wants to try one, let us know. Back to you.
I know. I won't. Can you explain? The image now has the fan in it. Can you kind of explain how it works? I don't know if a lot of people understand the concept of a powered flow hood. If you could explain that quickly.
Well, with this device, we take the rectangular hood that you see and we push it up to the exhaust fan or whatever we want to measure. And you can't see it in this picture, but there's a little tiny red button beside one of the knobs. And you simply press the button, and the red fan that you see there starts spinning, and it's the part of the device that will do the zero pressure balance. So it keeps creating flow until the pressure at the register is zero. And this particular device has a capability of pressure near zero down to 1/100th of a Pascal. Even the best of our gauges, we have trouble getting 0.1, 0.2 on a good day. So this one is at least 10 times better at measuring zero flow than anything else that we've ever come across. So it's an amazing piece of equipment. Does that answer your question, Joe?
Yes, thank you. I'm going to pause here at the end. I'll try and come back to this, and basically Colin can talk about the options of what Retrotec is offering or with systems and all that kind of stuff. But I'm going to switch now real quickly to my other computer and give you some live demos. 1 second. All right, thank you, Dwayne. And hopefully you can see my screen also on there. So what I want to do real quick is actually, since I just talked about the frame and I got my gauges covered, so don't look at that. So here's the frame. I'll do my best to try and keep it in the image. So it snaps together. All right, 1 second. I know the video gets awkward here. So it just snaps together like you would, even like basic camping gear or something similar. Right? And I can press the button to release it. All right. So it's a lot simpler. It is kind of a heavy-duty plastic. I know that Retrotec spent years trying to make sure they had the best plastic. So the only thing I can do is also take my frame and actually just rack it, and it pops apart. I know the video is kind of slow, but in general, so the frame's together, and at the end of the day, I just take the whole frame and actually just kind of rack it, and everything kind of falls apart. So in terms of versatility, this is actually going to change how simple it is to set up your frame, get it into the door, and at the end of the day, you have it pulled apart. Hopefully that'll give you an idea of the new frame and the features that come along with that. So this is the new DM32, all right? The backside's got, I have some Velcro on it that I use for other stuff for training, but it's got a clip on it, which is very handy for clipping on your side, and it's got rare earth magnets at the bottom and at the top, so I can actually attach it to anything that's metal, like the hot water tank I described earlier. Almost anything on the gauge is actually interactive. That's why it's referred to as a smart gauge, because it's similar to your smartphone. So we thought that it was something that anywhere I touch here, I can actually change. So we had channel A at the top, and channel B is where my results are. Right. Over here is the device. Sometimes it gets difficult to see, but I'll bring up my options. These are the Minneapolis options, or actually, sorry, these are the ranges for the fan that I have. And it is the duct blaster. It tells me at the top, and it tells me which range do I want to pick. So I pick a range. If I'm going to leave it open, it goes back and is already set to be open. If I want to change devices, at the bottom I can change device. These are all the Minneapolis Energy Conservatory options and the duct blasters I showed before in the slides. At the bottom, the next page is a nice little feature. It's kind of like a mini app inside the gauge to do calculate CFM and flow. And the next page is the Retrotec fans. Sometimes the image is hard to see because it's how the screen works. So I'm going to pick the duct tester at the top. You automatically have to pick a range. So you cannot actually have the correct device without actually selecting the range. So I'm going to select the mid-range, very common. So now I can actually have my range set up. I can determine what results I have. I showed you that earlier, but I'll go through again here live. So now it's determined whether I want Pascal, CFM per 100 square feet, and if I toggle this, now you see some of the options that show up. So now I have cubic meters per square meter, CFM per square foot, and I can toggle all the way through until I get the one I want. So there's CFM per 1,000, and I'm back to CFM per 100 square feet, which is a common IECC code compliance. Interchanges per hour, or EQLA, and there's also the second page, which I mentioned earlier, of more options to select from. So on the back, I'm going to pick the flow area, CFM per 100 square feet. And I'm going to use the back arrow to go back to the main page. And here at the bottom, it's telling me area, because CFM per 100 square feet is calculated by area. So when I select the area, I can either keep 1,500 square feet, or I can enter a new number. Now let's say it's 2,100 square feet, and it's set. So now my calculated results are based on my area. At the bottom, it tells me now what model I have, that it's Wi-Fi or just regular DM32, and what version and what firmware I have, and it also tells me when it was calibrated. If your gauge may not have this information at the bottom, then you're ready for a firmware update. So we did a firmware update about a couple weeks ago, so if you need help with that or any guidance, send an email to support@retrotec.com, and or send a note here, we can make sure we contact you. All right, so the other options I have, which are set speed, is designed to set the speed of a fan. 100% is 100% of the fan. It depends on what application you're using. Most of us use a set pressure. And the settings is actually how I can do my baseline, how I can change the area or volume, the time average. The same screen I have where results are on there. This is how I control the Wi-Fi connection that I have. Power down, sound, some basic common settings, and on the back is the firmware information that I have. So in order to control the fan, the speed control that you're used to with a dial if you use Minneapolis is in the fan, but there also is an actual speed control knob on all the fans. So if you wanted to use the fan by itself with a speed control, they actually have one built into all of the fans that Retrotec has. So to actually run a test, it's as simple as turn the gauge on, confirm my device and the range, determine my results, and I'm going to hit set pressure. We're doing a duct test, so I'm going to do 25. I hit set, and I do have a duct tester in the other room that this is now actually reading from. So my results are being given to me right here. I can do reduce my pascals by pressing this button. So it's telling me that I'm seeking 25, and I'm trying to get up to 25. And I may have too much leakage on my system out there. I can also reduce where I'm seeking by doing up or down. As I mentioned earlier, I can turn on or off the add feature, which calculates the results at whatever feature, whatever pascals I'm seeking, or my test pressure. And I can also stop the fan. So that's the basic of the gauge. Everything you want to do in the gauge can be done in here. You do not need any other device to actually do all the features, from the results to controlling the gauge to set at any pressure. And I can set it also, when I train a lot, I also just set it to 10 pascals so I can get results and still talk over the fan. But I do not need a tablet or a smartphone or anything else to actually use all the features that the gauge does. It will create its own Wi-Fi signal if I needed to. So what I want to do now is actually show you the virtual gauge software and still have the gauge still on here live. So I'm going to put the gauge over to the side. And here's the virtual gauge software icon on your desktop. And so if it pops up, now many of you are used to the symbol that is used for settings. I can resize the screen, which is a great feature for whatever size monitor you have. So the little star icon is the settings. And when that tray pops out, this was the simulator I mentioned earlier, so I can actually run it in its standalone. Right? Or I can ask it to find gauges, and I can ask it to do USB or network, which is Wi-Fi. So I'm going to ask it to find gauges. And right now my gauge, because I have several gauges, is also connected to my PC through the common router. One, as I mentioned earlier, is that your PC or your mobile devices and the gauge have to be on the same network. And so I need to make sure my Wi-Fi is set to a different network. So I'm going to set that now. Okay, it looks as though I still have a screen and I have audio. Okay, good. We switched over. So ask it to find gauges. So I have this gauge next to me, and it found it through the Wi-Fi that I now made my PC and this gauge on the same network. And now I can actually tell it to connect. I did help somebody yesterday on their phone, so I was using so I had my Wi-Fi set up, which you can see on the screen, to create, and I wanted to set it up to join. And so now my gauge and my device are on the same. So these are the kind of common things that happen in the real world, and they happen today live. So that's always great to see they're easily overcome. So now I have two gauges, which I do have sitting next to me. So if I shift my image over, you can see that I do have two gauges here, and it's found both of them. Right? And I could bring both of them up, but for right now I just want to bring up the one that I've been using as the demo. Right? So this is the one that also is connected right now, so I'm going to, that's this one. Right? So now you can see that the same image on the screen here is the same image I have on my live webcam. So now I can control this gauge and the fan directly from my PC with my mouse. So I can do set pressure, 2.5, set. And I can also go over the gauge and actually change features also. So if I want to change my results to just CFM, easily done. I go back. And you saw that the screen on my PC and the live version of the gauge also changed. And I can stop the fan from the PC or from the gauge live. And since I do have two manometers sitting next to me, only one's connected to a device though, I can show you how I can control a duct blaster, and I can open up another version of the gauge, and I can connect it to another manometer. So now I can actually control two different manometers at the same time. So here's the other manometer that I have. All right. And for this one on the side, I'm going to change it to run a Minneapolis blower door. So I go through the change device, and it brings up all the tech devices, and I can select it here. It asks me to pick a range. Again, I can use the gauge live, or I can also use the PC. I'm going to say I'm on the B range. So now you can see that I have two separate devices, two gauges, and I'm able to control both of them from the PC. So here I can do set pressure, 2.5, I'm going to do leakage to outside, and set. And I can do the same over here from my PC. The system on the left is not connected to an actual fan, so I don't have any readings here to show you, but you can see that in general that they are connected, and I'm able to actually run two manometers from my laptop. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to shut down the virtual gauge. That's the software that you run on your PC. I'm going to cover up the gauge on the left, because I don't need it right now. All right. And I'm going to open up my iPad and adjust my camera. So this will run on the iOS, and it will also run on Android systems evenly and just as well. So you do not have to have an iOS or an iPad in order to use the software that I'll show you right now. Let me make my screen bigger. All right, so I'm going to open my iPad, and I downloaded the software, and it's on my iPad. It's called Gauge Remote. Right. And I want to make sure if it doesn't give me anything automatically that I'm on the right network, just as I had to do with my PC. So if I go up to Wi-Fi settings, I must pick the network that I have in here. And the reason that I'm actually using a network or a router is because I can now use multiple devices as a demonstration. I'm actually to find gauges, and I found the same two gauges that I'm sitting next to. All right. And if you're not sure which gauge you have, on the back it has a serial number, and this one is 00094. So I select the gauge I want, connect, and now I'm actually able to control the gauge and the fan, and I can now roam around the house as I needed to. So just as I had done before, I can do set pressure, 2.5, set, and you can see that the gauge and the device are reading the same. This would be the same way that I could roam around the house and determine the combustion appliance results, or do anything I wanted to do with the gauge and the fan remotely.
We'll be signing off for now, and thank you very much for your attention, and we look forward to having many happy testing days ahead of us. Bye for now.